On the surface, hiking sounds simple. You find a trail, you pack your bag, and you start walking. See, that's what I thought when I first started hiking, but after years of being on trail, I couldn't have been more wrong. While hiking at its core is simple, but there are some hidden mistakes that you might be making that could be ruining your trips or even putting you in danger. So in this video, I'm going to share some hard lessons that I've learned over the years, and my hope is that you can learn from my mistakes and fast track your learning so you can have more fun and stay safe on trail. And stick around to the end because the last one is something that most people don't talk about, and it might just be one of the most important ones on the list. All right, let's start out with one that has always caught me off guard, especially when I was new, and that is reading trail difficulty. See, you might be looking at all trails or your favorite mapping software, and you might just look at the distance required for a hike. Trust me, that does not tell the whole story. You really do need to consider two major factors. One being elevation, and one is whether or not it's going to be off trail. So let's talk about off trail hiking for a second. Now, most of you hiking on trail following a predetermined route already might not have to deal with this, but if you are backpacking, you may have to venture off trail sometimes to reach a really cool alpine lake or a really cool destination. See, if you're just looking at a map and you're planning a route that goes off trail a little bit, you might not realize just how dense that forest is, or if there's going to be a crazy rock scramble. So really learning how to look at a map and how to understand it is really going to help you on trail, especially before going on those epic off-trail adventures. Now, this one might sound obvious to some of you, but elevation matters a ton. See, when you're looking at a map, for example, and you see 1,000 feet of elevation gain in 1 mile, you might not think too much about it if you're new to hiking, but trust me, 1,000 feet in 1 mile is a ton. Not only is it just harder, it's a lot slower too. So if you're trying to get back to your car by a certain time of day, you really need to account for that elevation gain. You might be stopping more frequently. It might just be a slower pace. You really gotta factor in elevation. All right, the next thing on the list is learning to read the weather. And this might just be as simple as looking at the weather ahead of time. That's one part of it, but it's also learning how to read the clouds. So when you're actually in the backcountry, you can actually anticipate something before it happens. See, when you're out in nature, even though you might have looked at the forecast ahead of time, weather changes really fast. I know here in Colorado, you can have a thunderstorm roll in super fast, totally unexpected, unless you can hopefully read the weather and understand what's going on up there. But if you're doing like a normal day hike, really just looking at the weather ahead of time, looking at mountainforecast.com is a great one to see what's actually happening on the mountain you're about to summit. But just learning and knowing what is going to be anticipated is really big, and that also will guide how you're packing for your trip. So the next thing is totally related to the weather and specifically where you're actually going to be hiking. And that is sometimes you just have to wake up really freaking early to get to the trailhead. See, on long hikes where you're hiking for 10, 15 hours in a day, you have to start early in the morning. There's no choice because you need light and you also need to avoid weather. So unfortunately, if your eyes are set on a really big hike, you just have to accept the fact that you're gonna have to wake up really early to get to the trailhead and to get a parking spot. But if you're like me and you hate waking up super early to get to a hiking spot or hiking trail rather, then you might want to find either a hotel or even camp out somewhere nearby the trailhead. That's personally what I like to do, is camp out either at the trailhead if it's allowed, or camping out at a nearby campground. This saves a lot of time, especially if you have to drive really far into the mountains. All right, that brings me to my next truth about hiking, and that is most of the time you're not actually going to be alone. See, a lot of these trails that we're on are really well known, and you will expect to run into people, especially if you live in an outdoorsy environment like I do here in Colorado. It is just a given that you probably won't be alone because there are other people just like you who are trying to get out in nature. So if you're anything like me and you like to be alone in the solitude of nature, not hearing anybody else talk or just being around anybody else, then expect to hike at least 10 miles past your nearest trailhead to have any sort of luck about being alone. That's what I do at least, and it works out pretty well. Or if you want to hike on a harder trail, that's going to deter a lot of other people from going on that trail, and therefore there's going to be less people and less crowds that you have to deal with. So if you want to avoid the crowds, either go way farther away from the trailhead than you usually do, or than what most people do at least, or pick a really hard trail that most people, that your average person is probably not going to want to entertain. But also understand that we are in this beautiful world, and while we go here to have fun, there are animals out here that this is their home. So you have to be mindful that you might run into a bear, you might run into a mountain lion. So just expect the unexpected. while this is really rare, just understand that you are in their home. So just be mindful of that and understand those risks that are involved, although unlikely, are present. And depending on where you are in the world, this might be a greater or smaller threat. Have you ever had that awkward encounter where you're on the trail and you're hiking, you might be going uphill and you have another person going downhill, but there's a really small track and you're not sure if you should get over, if you should step aside or just keep walking and have them go over? Yeah, I've been there too. And there actually is a hiking etiquette rule that you should be following in those situations. So you may or may not know, but someone who is hiking up the hill has the right of way. And that is because it's usually harder for them, and it's a lot easier for someone who is walking down to stop, and you might not be out of breath. And it's just a common courtesy in the hiking community to give the person who is walking up the hill the right of way. So if you're hiking downhill and you see someone walking up, unless they explicitly say, yeah, go on ahead, keep walking, you should really be stepping aside and letting them hike up the mountain. So another thing that I have to mention, as we're talking about trail etiquette here, is leave no trace. Now, you've probably heard this a million times, but I must bring it up because it is that important. If you're ever gonna go on a trail, take what you bring in out with you. A lot of the times I see dog bags on the ground. I hate that. Don't do that. Don't be that person. So just be mindful, leave no trace, don't mark up trees, don't be that person, and just have fun out there, enjoy the nature without leaving a mark. All right, so this next thing is a collection of items that you should definitely be bringing, and something I wish I knew a lot earlier in my hiking journey. I would have been a lot safer and would have avoided a lot of unfortunate situations, let's just say that. And that is bringing the 10 essentials, or what I like to call also the 11 essentials if you want to include like a GPS or navigation and satellite communicator. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lecture you on the 10 essentials. There are 100 other videos that you can look at for that, but just understand that they are important and that they should be in your backpack, even if they add a few more grams of weight. And it's really important that you have those in emergency situations where you could be using that gear for you or someone else on trail. Now, even if you never use the essentials, you might be able to help someone else on trail. Say you find an injured hiker and they need some first aid, you might be able to help them with that, or you can use your navigation or satellite communicator to call for some help. So I really like to include the satellite communicator in there as an essential just for that reason alone. But yeah, bring the 10 essentials. They are no joke. You really do need to bring them. They are worth the wait. Think of it as an insurance policy. You wouldn't drive your car without having insurance, right? So just think of the 10 essentials as an insurance policy, learn how to use them, and bring them with you. All right, this next one, I have a personal story that I want to start out with. So when I was hiking the Adirondacks with a few buddies of mine, I was fairly a fresh hiker. I really didn't truly know what I was doing. I definitely didn't have the 10 essentials at the time, and I had no idea what the heck electrolytes were. And I was about 5 or 6 miles into the trail. It was a really hot day, and my legs started cramping up so hard, like I could not move. It was honestly one of the worst cramps I've ever had in my life. And thank God I had a friend there who knew what he was doing, and he was able to help me through those cramps and provide me some electrolytes, and we were good for the rest of the day. But man, after that moment, I will never not hike without electrolytes. They are so critical, and I really wish I knew about those earlier. So if you're a new hiker, social media probably has blasted you with electrolytes at this point, but if you don't know, you really do need to find some. My favorite is Liquid IV or Noon. Now, this next thing is something that I wish I learned a lot earlier. I would always go into a hike wanting to go as fast as possible, and I'd always just die out so fast. I just couldn't maintain the pace that I was hiking at. Well, that is where I learned the hard way, and that is to control your pace to a manageable level to where you can hold that pace for a long distance. Now, you might have the urge to stop, and you should when you want to get a drink or a snack, but if you're stopping just because your heart rate is super duper high, you might want to slow it down a little bit and just continue that pace up, even uphill, because the more you stop, the more you have to bring your heart rate back up as you're hiking up the mountain. And this actually is really inefficient on your body, so you want to avoid that as much as possible. But not only is pace important for your overall endurance, but where this really comes into play is just really enjoying the scenery that you're going out into nature for. Now, you wouldn't want to race through an awesome trail with these epic views. You want to continue at a pace and take all the scenery in. And that might mean stopping and to take a look at the really cool mountain view that you have on your left, for example. You should definitely be doing that. That's why we're out here in nature. So this is just a reminder to control your pace, but also understand that the reason you're out there is for fun and to enjoy this awesome scenery that we have the pleasure of being in. Okay, so you probably heard about going ultralight or reducing your weight on trail. It's really important, and you should be doing that for a good reason. But something that I don't ever hear, or at least not often, is about the volume of which your gear takes up. See, you can have something that's really light, but it might be bulky. Now, usually that is kind of coupled together, where if you have something lightweight, it usually packs down pretty well. Unfortunately, not every item is like that, and you do need to consider volume. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with a huge pack carrying all your weight. Now, if you're new or even experienced and you want to buy some new gear, make sure it's lightweight, but also look at the packed volume. And this is not just the dimensions of the item, but the actual packed volume of that item. For like a sleeping pad, for example, it might be really lightweight, but it might pack up really big. So just be mindful of that when you're looking for your next piece of gear. All right, that's it. So thanks for watching. I really hope you liked this video. If you like this video, you might like this other video I did a while back about my favorite gear, so check that out. And if you really enjoyed this video, I would love if you would subscribe and hit the like button. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a comment down below with your favorite tip or whatever tip you want to talk about. I would love to talk about it with you down there. Thanks for watching. Peace out.